Hello and welcome back to the WatchGecko YouTube channel. So it's getting around that time of year again where Baselworld is coming up slowly but surely. And we're starting to see a lot of articles and videos posted online talking about releases and predictions for the show. So we thought we'd join in and we'd talk about some of our favourite brands and what we expect to see.
Okay, so I thought we'd kick things off with Tudor. So I know you're a big fan of the brand, and after last year's exciting releases, you must be pretty eager to see what they do this time.
Yeah, so last year Tudor had a pretty good year. We recently got to try on actually the Tudor Pelagos, which came to the office, which we've also got the Blancpain here as well. Both those watches, they fit pretty well actually. I was quite surprised with the sizing and the thickness of those. I've always kind of been put off by them. But the Pelagos as well, that matte ceramic bezel was really nice and it's got a really solid click to it. So I'd quite like to see another Blancpain. I think I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who also feel the same. But for me, it just comes down to the size. I think if they had one that was 38mm, maybe 40mm, and is a little bit thinner, that would probably persuade me to at least consider a Blancpain, certainly more than I would at the moment. So yeah, I think that'd be an interesting release. So what about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. That would be really cool. I think something closer to a true vintage diver would be welcome in the collection, and that would definitely make me consider a purchase.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that with the new Tudor in-house chronograph that was based on a modified B01 that they used in the Blancpain chronograph last year, that we'll see a few more of the bi-compact chronographs.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of the Tudor big block chronographs, which were a line of vintage Tudors that were really heavily inspired by the Daytona back then. So if they did something more racing inspired than diving inspired, it would probably fit the chronograph look better. And I think it would have a bit more mass appeal, because I know lots of people had some gripes with the diving hands on the chronograph and having it cover over sub-registers. And overall the watch is quite thick and quite big. So again, something more vintage sized, maybe like a 40mm well, or 38 with a slimmer profile, or at least some better proportions to the case, so the brunt of the case isn't just in the side, then that'll probably be more wearable. So
yeah, I think so. I suppose the only thing with that is Tudor are kind of going away from their Rolex heritage, I suppose. So that would probably be something they'd have to consider, is, you know, how can we make something which is inspired by the past but isn't inspired by Rolex at the same time, i.e. being the Daytona. So either way, I think it's going to be a really interesting and exciting year for Tudor. Okay, right, that's Tudor done. Should we move on to something a little bit different? Maybe Chopard?
Yeah, so I was talking earlier to Tim about Chopard. So I'm quite a big fan of the LUC collection, particularly the ones they did in the late 90s when they first released the 1860.
Yeah, so the 37mm.
Yeah, so the little 37mm dress watch, and then they also did the Quattro and maybe a few other models.
Okay.
But I quite like the smaller size. So right now, I think Chopard's moved in the right direction by establishing their own identity through the hands and the quite distinguished indices. But what they lack now is the kind of reserved case size. So everything's okay if you've got a really big wrist, but for me, I can't really wear a 43mm dress watch because it'll look pretty silly. So I'd like to see something with a bit more of the old style cues that Chopard first came out with the 37mm case size and the quite heavy guilloche on the dial. But you know, with their new hands, their new identity, it'd be quite cool, and for how their movements are going, it's really good value for money. So if they could nail the size a bit more, I think it would be more competitive with what other brands are producing now. Yeah. So it would probably start to make people take them a bit more seriously as well. Yeah, I can see that. I think that is a trend which we've already started to see anyway, but going back to those smaller sizes, I think we can only expect that really from this year. I think that'll be a big trend, which hopefully we get to see as well, because we're a big fan of those smaller sizes. So okay, so next up I thought we could talk about Longines. I know you've had a few comments about that recently.
Yeah, so again, similarly to Tudor, they had a pretty good year last year, a lot of reissues, but for me, I feel that their current range is lacking in something, and for me that is a sports watch or maybe like a diving watch. A lot of their current range, they just remind me of fashion watches. I feel they're not that inspirational or aspirational as well.
Yeah, it's not a very focused range at the moment.
Not really, yeah. It seems to be quite a common theme, but a lot of their modern watches are just not quite right. And I think when you compare them to other watches in that price range, the likes of Oris and stuff, and even the Rado, the Captain Cook that came out recently, I think that's a strong price range that if they did something well, they could really nail it. So for me, it would have to be a sports model from Longines. I'm sure, again, like last year, they will probably release quite a few models, but I think that would suit their range really well. And again, they could really dominate that price range if they do it correctly. So
Yeah, so what, like a 38 to 40 mil diver, maybe similar to what we were hoping to see from Tudor, but
Yeah.
with a bit more of the Longines DNA in it.
Yeah, that would be nice. That might be a bit of a personal preference thing. That's what I would personally like to see. What I'd see them probably doing is probably more like a 41 mil, maybe 42. And then maybe they would release a women's version, and then that might be, 37, 38 mil. So you kind of have a lot of the market covered there. So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay, so next up, I thought we could talk about Breitling. So I can see this year being a big year for Breitling with the new CEO, Georges Kern, who came in middle of last year. So recently they released the new Navitimer collection with the 43mm chronograph and a few of the 41mm new
like
models
the
with the day date, and I think there's
another
a world timer one or
yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
When I first saw them, honestly, I didn't really think they're great. They seem very uninspired, and the design is just, I don't know. It looks like they tried, but it's a bit basic. It's not really the big showpiece that we thought was going to come out of Breitling with the new CEO. But I'm thinking because it's so close to Baselworld, they might be just trickling out a few models before the big showstopper. Yeah. So I'm hoping this year for Breitling that they'll come out with a lot of nice new models, maybe something a bit smaller than 43mm, because I think they're just trying too hard to be that big trendy watch. But I think it's just a bit outdated now, and it needs something fresh, I think, for Breitling, considering how it's gone for the last few years.
Yeah, so I think that would be a big move and a big thing for Breitling to show off to the watch community. We're prepared to make a smaller watch, or we're prepared to move and adapt with the market. I think that'd be interesting. Yeah. And it would keep them fresh. It would keep them modern. People will be talking about them. A lot more people will be wearing them. We'll probably find younger people will be getting into them as well. So they're pretty competitively priced, but there aren't many young people wearing them. So it could be an interesting year.
Yeah. New model probably is the best one to go for.
Yeah.
Because it's okay releasing continuous models of the same collection, like having a million different Navitimers, which, if
that'd be nice. A 38mm one I wouldn't say no to, but
if they can do something new, something fresh, Georges Kern can really prove his worth to Breitling and just show, actually what they can do.
Yeah.
Because they still make a good watch. There's nothing wrong with the products. It's just, I think the marketing and the design right now just needs to be a bit more focused.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an exciting year ahead. Okay, let's move on to one of your favourite brands then, Ben, being Glashütte Original.
Yep, so I'm a big fan of Glashütte Original, as Tim said. I really like the Pano collection, being that it has the asymmetrical dial with the big date, and I particularly like the Pano Reserve. So the manual Y movement without the rotor helps keep the thickness down.
Yeah.
So the Panomatic Lunar is around 1 or 2 mil thicker, which I think can ruin the aesthetic, being that it won't really fit under the cuff and the dressiness of the piece is kind of lost.
Okay.
And I think the manual Y movement helps you interact with the watch a bit more, being that it is a very movement-orientated watch. So I'd like to see a smaller watch come out of the Panomatic collection. So I think the loomed hands are a bit unneeded for a piece like that.
Yeah.
It's not really an everyday piece. It's quite dressy, and it just doesn't need loom, really. So I think a smaller case size, being closer to 38 or 39, would be welcome. But over the original, I think it needs slightly thicker bezel just to help the proportions, because at the moment the dial does look overly big compared to what it would need to look, or what it could look. So I think if they reduce the hour and the minute openings, it would allow them to reduce the dial overall, allow for a bit of a thicker bezel, maybe slightly longer lugs, just help the proportions. And without loom, they could go with more interesting hands, I think, maybe more interesting indices, because at the moment they've just got small batons for all the 12-hour indices. So
yeah,
I think a dressier, more special piece in that collection would be welcome, and I think then it would help it compete a bit more with the Lange one, because at the moment they're very similar models, but I think the Lange really takes it in the design front, even though the movements are incredibly similar, and the Glashütte original equivalent is like half the price or something. But I think the little design cues are what throw some people off from buying it.
Yeah, and that would just help push the brand up even more further. Yeah.
So next up we'll talk about Zenith. So I know that Tim had some thoughts recently about what they might be releasing this year.
Yeah. So I was having a look at their range, and their main 3 categories of watches that really stood out to me that they have on their website. So they've obviously got the chronographs, they've got their pilot's watches, and they've got dress watches. So I was having a look back at what they've done in the past, and 60 years ago this year they released the Zenith S58, which was a diver. And for a brand which seems to be lacking in divers, it's 60 years on since the original release. I could really see a reissue coming to the range. It would be quite nice again to see a smaller case size, but I could probably see them actually going for a little bit bigger. So they'd probably be around the 41mm for me, maybe 42, which again wouldn't really suit my wrist, but there's a lot of people it does. Zenith watches, a lot of them are slightly bigger. So that's what I'd quite like to see from Zenith. Yeah,
it would be quite interesting to see that watch reimagined. So I'm sure they'd do something a bit different, considering their latest releases have been ultra modern with the Defi range, with their really high tech movements and stuff. So for them to do a very vintage inspired model will be quite fresh for them. Not really
for
fresh
them,
for the industry,
for what they're doing at the moment. I think if you look back at the range in general, their pilot's watch and stuff, typically they do have that vintage aesthetic. So it's not like a vintage diver wouldn't fit in very well. It's just like I said, what they're doing recently, it's something a bit different. And I like to think they'd maybe look to what Tag have done in the past with the Altavia last year. Yeah, and, it's possible, and that was one of the most popular watches released in 2017. So, okay, so next up, I think we should cover the oldest name in horology, being Blancpain.
Yep, so I'm a big fan of Blancpain, especially the Le Mans collection. So this year I'd be looking for something a bit more everyday wear in that collection. I really like the double step bezel and the curved case. It's very wearable, and most of the watches are pretty decently sized, but they're all really excessive in their complications. There's not really one for everyday wear, apart from the Aqualung, which was released in, I think, 2005. Yeah. But unfortunately, that was a limited edition, or at least in steel it was, and the rose gold one isn't particularly good for everyday wear, considering that it's a lot higher value and you don't really want to damage it or scratch it up. So something similar to that, maybe without the grand date, so they could get away with doing something really similar without infringing on the limited edition of the first one. So maybe a time-only Le Mans for everyday wear, but keeping the same design principles and the really high level of finishing that comes out of that collection would be nice. Yeah, no, that'd be interesting to see it a bit more in line with some other brands that release, again, simple watches. That'd be good to see. Okay, so the Tag Altavia, what do you think about that last year then? Yeah, so that was quite an interesting release. I did follow the voting cup thing that they did in order to finalise the design for the Altavia. Compared to the originals, I think it's a bit lackluster, to be honest. The case size is a bit big for me. I can accept that, but really I think the dial opening's too small. If the bezel was a bit thinner, I think it would help the vintage aesthetic, even with the bigger size. Yeah. I quite like the beads of rice bracelet that it came on. It's quite a good step for them, and that's definitely a really popular bracelet right now. But I think some new models out of that range would benefit it. Yeah, I remember you saying about the bezel is one of the first things you said when you saw it. And as soon as I saw it as well, you suddenly pointed it out to me. I was like, wow, I can't not see that now, that the bezel compared to the original, it's just a little bit chunkier, isn't it? So yeah, talking about the bezels actually, I think a stainless steel bezel maybe for the Altavia line could be interesting. Similarly, over the years, they've done military issue ones, so maybe like a PVD black version, or maybe like Pepsi bezels, and explore the vintage options they have with the Altavia. They've got loads of different versions. I think so, yeah. I think another one that they could explore a bit more is the Heuer 01 range. So that's quite a cool range. It's the really modern take on a sports chronograph with the overly skeletonized dial, the quite angular case design. The only issue I have with that at the moment is that it's only in like the 42.5 and the 45mm sizes, I think, and it is extremely thick. So if they could slim down the movement a bit and produce one a bit smaller, as themed with this video, another smaller watch would be appreciated. I think being big, it kind of suits the aesthetic, so I don't think it needs to be too small, but maybe 41, it would just make it sit better on smaller wrists, because if you have a wrist like mine, when I tried it on in shop, it just overhangs on each side and doesn't really look that good. Especially if you're not used to it, I think a smaller size could be needed, but I quite like the fact they're a little bit bigger. I think, as you mentioned, it does kind of suit what they've done and they release. So, okay, and finally, we can't really do a video like this without talking about Rolex. So, any models you'd like to see this year specifically? Yeah, so I think I'd like to see a new Air King. Really. Okay. So I think that range at the moment is quite unloved and it's a bit random. It sticks out from the other Rolex models quite a lot because it doesn't really go with anything. But I think just the Air King range provides a lot of opportunity for some more interesting pilot's watch designs and maybe some brand new designs for Rolex as it is. So another one of those would be cool. Yeah, well, they've got a good history as well. That Air King range is such an interesting history. Similarly to the Explorer, they can sort of really
develop that.
Yeah, I think so. And there's been rumours of Redline sub, hasn't there?
Yeah, well, last year obviously they did release the Sea Dweller, which had the red text on, which has been really popular. I think it's in the 43mm size. So I'd quite like to see a Submariner. There's many people out there as well who, for the past 3 or 4 years, have been asking for a new sub. So I'd like to see Rolex sort of step up and accept the challenge and release a new sub. I think people will be really happy with that.
Yeah.
Similarly, the Cellini line. Obviously, last year we had the Moon phase. I'd quite like to see more done with the Cellini line. I personally feel it's a range which doesn't get a lot of love. Maybe some new dial colours, new dial textures, that sort of thing would be really interesting. So we have to see.
Yeah. Can you imagine the waiting time on a Redline sub though, if they do one?
Well, it would be pretty huge, or we'd see something similar to what the Sea Dweller's done. With retailing at 10 something and selling at 13, 14. So
yeah.
Again, it's a new Rolex model, and it's something that's slightly different to the original. So people go crazy for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think another cool one would maybe be a steel Daytona, but on the Oyster Flex bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
So the rubber strap option on the Daytona, I think, is only on the white gold one at the moment, and
yeah,
maybe another, but definitely not on steel yet. So if you like the rubber strap, there's not really an option unless you want to go aftermarket. So on the steel Daytona, rubber strap maybe be more accessible, and it's another steel Daytona model, so it would hopefully average down the wait times if you do want a steel Daytona, because at the moment you've got to wait, upwards of a year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I've heard a lot of different times for that one. Yeah.
So we'll be interested to see what they release.
Okay, so that's a few predictions from Baselworld 2018 from me and Ben.
Yep, and if you have any predictions, be sure to tell us in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Yeah, we'll also be at the show as well, so you do expect some coverage from me and Ben at the show. So if you've never been, make sure you do subscribe, because we'll be posting videos, sharing our experience and giving you all a taste of what Baselworld 2018 is going to be like. Yeah, but until then, we'll see you in the next video.